Alabasandria paused as Coco's words sank in, and the anger faded from her face. Relief eased the knot of dread in her stomach. "You know what? That might actually work," she said, her voice showing cautious hope. "The Church of Satan. There are others from the demon realm there, people who can protect him and understand what he is and what's at stake. Maybe there he'll have a future, and we'll finally be free of this nightmare." For the first time that night, her tone carried real optimism, a rare comfort in all the fear. Coco nodded, her jaw tight as she paced the dim room, arms folded across her chest. The air was heavy with worry, shadows moving on the cracked walls as a gust shook the loose window pane. She stopped and looked at Alabasandria. "Agreed," she said slowly, "but if you didn't hurt the baby's mother, then who did?" Her voice dropped to a whisper, filled with suspicion and fear. The question hung in the air, demanding more than a simple answer. "I honestly have no idea," Alabasandria said, her brow furrowed with worry as she sat on the edge of the worn sofa. She pressed a shaking hand to her forehead, trying to remember every detail. The mother was distracted. Someone knocked at the front door, and she left the nursery. That's when I slipped in as quietly as I could. The baby was asleep, wrapped in a blue blanket. I took him and barely got out before everything went wrong. She swallowed, her voice unsteady. As soon as I reached the street, a man ran out of the house behind me. His face looked wild. I could feel his rage and fear. He chased me down the block, shouting the child's name. I ran, holding the boy, and didn't look back. I thought he was the father, but I never saw his face clearly. It was all a blur of panic and adrenaline. Coco's stern look softened, empathy showing on her face, even as urgency filled her eyes. She sat on a shaky chair, phone in hand, typing quickly as she searched for the nearest Church of Satan. Her knuckles were white in the blue glow of the screen. "If you hadn't taken him," she said quietly, her words anxious, "the prince might have died with his mother. You gave him a chance, Alabasandria." The ticking of an old clock on the wall grew louder, counting the seconds as danger closed in. The baby moved in his sleep, a small fist near his cheek, unaware of the danger in both worlds. Alabasandria's eyes grew distant, her voice serious and low. "You know how our kind and every other creature in the demon realm sees cambions. They're considered abominations, threats to pure bloodlines. What makes you think this boy will survive in either world? If humans find out what he is, they'll reject him, maybe even hunt him." She looked down at the baby, her tone heavier. "He's not just a cambion. He's marked by his skin and by the blood in his veins. His dark skin will make him a target for human cruelty and prejudice. Neither side will claim him. He'll be an outsider everywhere, cursed by both his demon heritage and his humanity." The sadness in her words filled the room, the unfairness of the child's fate hanging between them. She was quiet for a moment, letting her words sink in. The baby whimpered in his sleep, as if he could feel the sadness in the room. "This child," Alabasandria went on, her voice flat and cold, "has no hope. If the demons don't kill him, America will. He's doomed either way. You will finish your mission, Coco. One way or another, someone will erase him." Her eyes showed both resignation and bitter defiance. The air in the room was tense, grief and inevitability growing as they realized how unlikely it was for the innocent child to survive. Determined to support his friend through the darkest chapter of his life, Tyson moved quickly. He called their supervisor, his voice tight with worry as he described Sevyn's shattered state after the loss of his partner. 4 days of bereavement leave, Tyson argued, barely scratched the surface of the tidal wave of grief and numbness threatening to drown Sevyn. He made it his mission to advocate for Sevyn's mental health, not just as a professional obligation, but as an act of brotherhood. His emails and calls implored HR to approve extended leave, and he pressed for Sevyn to be connected with a skilled psychologist and a compassionate psychiatrist. Tyson's conviction was clear. Only with patient, professional help could Sevyn hope to climb out of the abyss of pain and begin to heal. Exactly 1 year after Valentina's death, on February 21st, 2023, Mardi Gras transformed New Orleans into a riot of color and sound. Revelers from every corner of the country spilled into the French Quarter, young and old, rich and poor, saints and sinners, drawn together by the pulse of Mardi Gras. The city thrummed with life. Dancers in feathered masks spun through the streets, their bodies moving in time with the thunder of drums, the blare of trumpets, and the brassy joy of the bands. Neon lights flickered over cobblestones slick with spilled beer. The air was thick with the scents of fried dough, sweat, and jasmine. Floats the size of houses rumbled down the avenues, painted in gold, purple, and green, their sides festooned with sequined banners and grotesque papier-mâché creatures. Crews in wild costumes tossed arcs of glittering beads into the outstretched hands of crowds 3 deep, their laughter and shouts rising above the music. Behind the floats, a procession of women danced in lingerie that sparkled under the streetlights, their bodies painted with swirling patterns that caught every camera flash. Mardi Gras 2023 was a fever dream of revelry, a night where people set burdens aside and joy was contagious. The city's historic streets became a stage, every alley and balcony alive with celebration. Laughter spilled from crowded bars, friends linked arms with strangers, and the music of 100 parades mingled with the beat of 1,000 hearts. For a brief, shining moment, the world felt free. But not everyone found solace in the chaos. Amidst the swirling joy, Sevyn Wayne stood apart. His grief was a dark tide, an invisible cloak that set him adrift in a sea of jubilation. He knelt on cold flagstones at a makeshift vigil, lighting candles before a framed photograph of his wife and child, their smiles captured in a fleeting, happier time. The flames danced in the night breeze, casting elongated shadows that echoed the ache in his chest. Sevyn's whispered prayers trembled in the air, tears streaking his cheeks as he begged for peace, for answers. The sound of his anguish cut through the laughter of passing revelers, but few paused to notice the broken man in their midst. Most drifted past, swept up in the intoxication of Mardi Gras, blind to the grief that lingered at the city's heart. When his prayers ended, Sevyn rose, his movements slow but steady. He wiped his face with the back of his hand, revealing a mask of sorrow and resolve. With a deep, shuddering breath, he pulled out his phone and dialed the detective assigned to his wife's case. His eyes, red-rimmed and hollow from sleepless nights, shone with desperate hope as he waited for the call to connect. "Hello, Detective Knight. This is Sevyn Wayne," he said, voice thick and raw. "I'm calling to see if there are any new leads about my wife's death, or the whereabouts of my missing child." Knight's response was clipped, almost mechanical. "We've been through this, Mr. Wayne. Let me do my job. I'll contact you if anything changes." Sevyn's knuckles whitened as he gripped the phone. He leaned forward, the light from a solitary lamp tracing shadows over his clenched jaw and furrowed brow. "That's always your answer," he said, bitterness seeping into every syllable. "You promised you'd do everything to bring my wife's killer to justice. It's been a year. There are still no leads." His hands shook with rage and pain. "If Valentina were a blonde, white woman, don't you think her killer would have been caught the same day? If I were white, you'd probably drink my tears like spring water." He tried to steady his voice, but desperation broke through. "How can you have all this technology, all these resources, and still not a single tip? Someone had to have seen something. Did you even talk to my neighbors?" Detective Knight leaned back in his squeaking chair, arms crossed, eyes heavy with fatigue. "We've done everything we can. We interviewed your neighbors. Everyone had an alibi. No one saw a thing. As far as I know, everything checks out." There was an edge of irritation in his tone. "You're a teacher, Mr. Wayne. You focus on your students. Let me do my job, solving your wife's case." Detective Knight paused, lips pressed into a thin line as he weighed his next words, the phone cradled against his shoulder. He tried to sound patient, but the tension in his voice betrayed him. "Let me put it this way, Mr. Wayne," he began, voice slow and deliberate. "Imagine if you got non-stop calls from your students' parents all year, each one demanding updates about their child's progress. Wouldn't it wear you down, answering the same questions, repeating the same reassurances? That's what this feels like on my end." He let out a long, weary sigh, knuckles whitening as he gripped the receiver. "So, I'm going to ask you to sit back and let me handle this. You know," his tone sharpened, "people who call in over and over in the middle of an investigation often have something to hide. Statistically, the spouse is usually the prime suspect in a murder like this. If you didn't have an airtight alibi, being at school teaching that day, I can tell you, you'd be at the top of my list." He paused, exasperation flickering across his features as he rubbed his temples. The fatigue of too many late nights and dead ends etched into the lines around his eyes. The words hit Sevyn hard. His heart pounded, and disbelief and anger burned in his cheeks.